let's just jump into this, and maybe you can introduce yourself as and Cormac, why don't you kick us off and tell everybody what we're doing and introduce
Well, why not?
your longtime friend here.
Okay. You're usually better at the intro part. I'm gonna let you
It's already
intro, then I'll
started.
like kind of blend in, and
It's
then
already
yeah. I
started.
mean, most likely this is how it's gonna start anyway when we edit it. It's just
It'll be
me
this.
fumbling around with words. Oh, I need to.
So in the
Um,
last episode, we were talking about we gave everybody homework, and I had thrown up the idea of, hey, let's
Homework.
yeah, we've never done homework before, and everyone's at home,
What
so
kind of
we
show is
felt
this?
we felt it was appropriate. So the idea was to, I mean, this is the best kind of homework, is watch a movie and then let's talk
Mhm.
about it afterwards. So I threw out the idea of watching Citizen Architect. It's like the 10-year anniversary for the movie, something like
Yep.
that, which is
Yep.
crazy.
That's about right.
And and Cormac loved the idea. Obviously, he has a connection with Rural Studio in Auburn. So I knew that I had already had this all designed in my head. I knew
you
it
were
was all
baiting
going to,
me.
yeah. So of course this was accepted, challenge accepted, and so I've actually watched it a couple times now since I threw out that idea, because I usually fall asleep during movies, to be honest. But this one, when I first saw it, was right. I think it was 2015, Cormac, at the
Mhm.
AIA
Yeah,
convention,
yeah.
and we went to the Auburn alumni reception because my school was not represented there, so I tagged along with Cormac, and it wasn't this movie that was shown there, but there was another short film shown at the reception, right?
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
And it was an amazing experience, I felt like, and then that kind of opened my eyes to this other movie, and which had been out, I guess, for about 5 years at that point. And so Cormac said he knew somebody who might be interested in talking about that from the program, and so that's where you come in. So Steve Hoffman, why don't you introduce yourself, and then you and Cormac can share some stories about Auburn and about Rural Studio, and we could talk about the movie.
Yeah, well, I'm really happy to be here talking to you guys. This is a great opportunity. And my name is Steve Hoffman, and I work currently at a firm in Portland, Maine. I'm a recent transplant from New York City to Portland and really love my new home here. And kind of professionally and personally, I had this strange odyssey directly from school at Auburn to teaching at the Rural Studio for 4 years. And then directly from being at the Rural Studio, I met a woman, got married, and moved to New York City. And I always said I moved from a town that had a general store and a blinking light to the West Village.
Wow,
So it's about as extreme as you get.
that sounds exciting.
Yeah, I was definitely exciting. It was, it's one of those things where the more I look back at my life, I'm like, what the hell? But it
Yeah.
was a great adventure.
It's that kind of stuff, though, that makes people good architects, I think. That variation in
Yeah,
experience is something that many people don't. And so it does actually influence and, inform the work that you do.
it's worked for me. I mean, it's definitely had its impact and challenges, positive ways
Yeah.
and challenges on my career. But I think all in all, I'm really happy for the diversity of experiences that I've had, and also kind of starting out grounded in both the educational environment at Auburn and particularly then at the Rural Studio. I think it was an exceptional basis for becoming an architect.
And that's where I felt like I missed out. I mean,
So
I went to a polytechnic university, so we did have a lot of hands-on, but I just
Yeah,
nothing like it. Just doesn't even compare.
yeah. And I have to say, now it's 20, gotta be going on 25, 20.
you graduated in '97,
Yeah, and the
just
studio
so that you
started in
forgot.
oh my God, it is almost, so it'll be 30 years. 93 was when the
Yep.
studio actually started.
Yeah.
So when you think about that, first of all, usually programs like that haven't lasted that long. Kind of innovative, new. educational programs. So that's really a testament. And I think it's a very different experience now than when it started out. And that's just obviously, things evolve. And I think it's a really good thing from what I see that they're doing and the few times I've been down there. And it just goes to show that in the life of a program, it's not the same thing from start to finish either,
Yeah.
It's had to change with the times. I mean, when I went there, computers were hardly used.
Yeah.
Now they've integrated that into the whole idea of design build, which I think was a really interesting thing to tackle. Would have been exciting to be around when that was going on, but
yeah, that's really interesting. It's the same time that I was in school as well, and the only connection that I have to this idea, this movie, and you guys, I guess, is that besides the Auburn reception that I went to, was that Steve Bodain's came out and we did a kind of after I graduated session where we did a design build project for FEMA with earthquake relief kind of kiosks, and they had these the idea was that everybody would build kind of this portable piece of architecture that could go in and deploy and become, because California earthquake zone, everyone's expecting the big one to hit. And what happens when a city like Pasadena, who's built out of unreinforced masonry, gets hit by the big one? And so it was like we had several teams doing design build projects, and everybody designed and built a FEMA kind of kiosk that they could get information, get supplies from, and that would be, brought in on the back of a flatbed and deployed or whatever. And maybe there was multiple of them throughout the city. And it was just such a great experience working with him. I've always been a maker at heart and always been a builder. And I always felt like that was the key to actually being a good architect, was knowing how things actually went together because I had done it.
Right.
And he was just a great source of inspiration, and he had a great energy, and I think that kind of comes across in the movie as well. And just his kind of outlook on living on the site and being there, and this goes back to that quote that I was talking about earlier from Stephen Ross in the movie, where he just talks about how the design through that process of building, it could actually evolve for the better. Right. And that situation and the context could inform previously drawn designs in a way that would make them even more appropriate and more relevant and more beautiful and more perfect. And I thought, like, I wrote that down because I felt like that is a disconnect that is enormous in the work that we do in our firm, because, it is a handoff on many levels.
I think that quote is exactly what Cormac, you were talking about in terms of interaction in the office. It's the ability to be available for spontaneity, and also just to be kind of a fly on the wall makes you able to, things can happen. You see things that you don't normally see. You hear things that you might not hear if you're not available in that way. And I think a lot of focus on design build is this notion of the actual technique of construction, but I think it shouldn't be overlooked that it's a different scenario, it's a different situation, that gives you different possibilities for knowledge and understanding and interaction that can lead to really good things.
Well, one of the things that we were kind of commenting on before we kind of started this conversation was that this new agility, this new mobility that could potentially spawn out of this new normal, new abnormal, whatever we're going to want to really call it, is just this flexibility and mobility of the architect to be able to be in places that actually can help inform their design, and just the interaction with the client that is something that we don't necessarily do as often as we should within kind of like the standard context of how we do things now, because there are often times where people are on the project that have never been to the site. And one of the things that I most certainly learned from Auburn is the connection to the site it enriches the
Matters,
design far more than just taking a set of like as-built documents or maybe a site plan where you don't really truly understand the topography of things and try to fit something on there that you have no kind of like context of what that space is.
Yeah.
And I was talking about as like something as mundane as doing a set of I'm working on a project right now that I've got almost 400,000 square feet of renovation portion of the project that being out on site and doing my demolition drawings on site walking around not only is going to help me inform like the technical aspect of just doing those particular documentation, but it's also really going to kind of inform what I can do with the existing conditions that just looking at a set of like 2D as-built really is never going to tell me how to actually do that.
Oh yeah, putting your body in the space is gold.
Well, that's what architecture is about, right? It's about place. Right. It's about space. And yet so many times, like that drawings are an abstraction of that. Yeah. And we have further abstracted that by assuming that everybody fully understands what's going on, having never been there, and like a Google Earth overview is good enough, right? Or a Google Street View, if you're lucky, if they've shot that street, instead of actually going there. And that further level of abstraction has taken us further away from the work, for sure.
Yeah, and I think there's a visceral understanding that comes from being physically present in a space. We all know that. You know, you've drawn something 1,000 times, and even with computer modeling, I think we all have an innate inner sense of like three-dimensionally. Oh, I think it's going to feel like this, and we're always surprised, right? When you go out there on the site and it's being built, you're like, oh,
right,
yeah,
it's bigger than I thought.
Right. Exactly.
Usually for me, that's how I feel.
Or like even, you know, again, something simple. The example is that, you know, I'm building in the mid-Atlantic, and so, you know, over time, you know, there's buildings, and then they were demolished, and another building was built in this place, and then they were demolished, and then now I'm building in there. But, you know, hey, somebody forgot that it says remove this building in the as-built beforehand, but they left the foundations in there and things like that. And now do I ask the client, hey, you know, we're going to have like a couple $1 million worth of change to remove those, or can I retrofit my design over some of these existing conditions? And just really kind of like getting your hands into the soil of things. And I always talk about this on the show in past episodes, and it's something that was innately learned from Auburn, is being able to take people out onto site as a way to let the, you know, I just brought some more people on the project. We lost a couple of people and we needed to add some more people. So I brought some people on the project, and they're from our DC office, and I had them come up and work out of the Baltimore office for a few days, specifically to take them on a field trip over the course of a few days out onto site, to walk the site, walk the existing building, talk to them about, you know, here's the design that we've got proposed. Here's the existing conditions. Walk through and have them touch and look and understand all of these different interfaces of this new building to this existing condition, to truly understand what the hell I'm asking them to do. Because I can ask them, hey, do this detail or that detail, and it's fine. But when that detail is intersecting into an existing condition, how does that interact or react to that existing condition, and what is the real detail for that? Because no manufacturer's detail is going to say, this is how my detail works with an existing building.
Right.
And so being able to put your hands on it and all that other stuff in, and the great thing about coming from where we came from is, like, you know, even the let's just call them at, you know, in studio back in Auburn, you know, we would always do those hands-on projects and things like that. But, you know, getting out to things like the rural studio and the urban studio and things like that, where you're actually able to work within the context of the work that you're asking them to do, really makes them understand, you know, what it is that you're trying to do. I mean, I always talk to people about, okay, so you drew this line. What does this line mean? And being able to take them out onto site and pointing, say, that line right there that you drew is that beam right there, or that column right there. It just looks like a box to you in plan, but that box is this concrete column. And having them really truly understand what the hell it is, because unfortunately there's a lot of programs out there that really don't do these kind of things. And so when you're coming into it, they're still kind of in like theoretical la land and not really truly understanding what the hell it is that you're going to be expecting them to do. And then ultimately you want them to kind of like build this experience knowledge and then, you know, kind of take over from you.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like we're all in agreement that we like the design build model.
Yeah. And I think I think you can define that pretty broadly. I think that's another sort of misnomer around design build in the rural studio, even though it is true that what the studio does and what other programs like it do is a potential model for practice that's very particular. I think that the if you will, the philosophy of design build or the mentality of design build as being just a method where you aren't just dealing with things in a technical or abstract way, and you're dealing with things, you know, in a larger contextual or hopefully physical way, not just mental. I think you could apply that broadly to all kinds and formats of practice without strictly being like, oh, I'm actually swinging a hammer.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
it is interesting to me how because architecture, I think it's one of the things talked about in the movie is talking about it being a messy process, and we've talked about that on the show before too, being very comfortable in that messy process, where a lot of people are not. Like they're used to seeing the finished product, they're used to seeing it all buttoned up and you know, quote unquote perfect, but the construction process is equally as messy, if not more so. It's definitely physically more messy because just the size of the objects and things that you're dealing with, but still being okay with that and learning to live through that process and being comfortable with things not being finished or not even like fully thought out. I think that's one of the attractive things to me about the idea of design build is you don't need to figure it all out ahead of time. And you know, kind of going back to that quote that we talked about a minute ago from Stephen Ross and talking about how things can develop based on things that you learn along the way and having it evolve even throughout that design. I mean, that's what a design process is, but even through the building process and having it inform what needs to be done because you've got new, better information, right? And I think that's probably one of the things that is hard to, even for larger firms where you've got to deliver on a deadline and you've got to have the sets got to include these things that are all figured out, right? And they're not figured out. They're
to the best you can.
To the best that we can. And then later on, newer, better information equals change order, right? And that's hard because you didn't have that information. And so there was no way for you, and that's why this is a profession, and that's why, you know, we have, you know, insurance, and that's why we've got all these things. But it also is because we've stepped away from that responsibility. And I feel like the hands-on physical aspect of making changes, like seriously making changes at the last moment, is what is so attractive to me about design build, because it is the best information that you have all the way up to the last moment, and you get to customize and, you know, perfect that thing for that place based on that. And I think that that's just something that we miss out on quite often.
Yeah, it is definitely hard to execute with people's expectations around schedule and budget, you know, in the real world. And things do, and also, you know, there's so much pressure to get it right the first time, and there's pressure on the builders. The builders are expected to price it right, you
ahead
know,
of time,
ahead of time, and then when things change, they want to increase the cost, and I think that's understandable. Our firm does a lot of CM work, meaning we work with CMs as a building, you know, delivery method, and I find that I've been lucky. Most of the CMs I've worked with have been very experienced, good builders, and they approach it with sort of that design build, to an extent, that design build mentality where they expect and anticipate, things being clarified, let's say, if not evolved, but clarified in the field. And we've had some really, to me, extraordinarily positive results coming from that interaction with the CM. That is the closest that I've had in a professional capacity of doing design build in a, I don't know, more conventional type of practice.
Yeah, I would definitely say that, the design bid build method kind of starts to compartmentalize and detach people from their sense of responsibilities. And once it moves on out of their hands onto the next one and then onto the next one, they kind of like it isn't fully as collaborative as, even with CMs. I mean, CMs are closer to the design bid or the design build method, especially if you in both Evan and I've got lots of experience with CMs as well, just because of the nature of public works and controlling the cost and things like that, where sometimes you hope that they're a little bit more collaborative and, they do their constructability reviews and, it's just kind of this whole part and parcel of like, I want to do this, but I need you to help me do this. And it's just kind of a very more cohesive delivery method. I was talking a little bit earlier before the call with Evan about, kind of like the old ways of the architect, of the master builder, and this philosophy that, they were out there kind of like directing everything. And because of liability and all of this other stuff, we've sort of moved away from doing that. But I mean, this new mobility that, Evan was kind of mentioning to me, or this new agility that architects could, that could spawn out of this, this kind of like mobile office kind of situation, is being able to be more present on job sites in a more kind of like design build or more engaged CM type effort, and like I said, using that example of just doing, demolition drawings and being able to be out there and like looking at and touching and saying, okay, I'm going to remove that wall, click, take picture, input it into the computer, work with a team that's out there with me of architects that kind of truly understand. I mean, the level of educational benefits that a young architect would be able to have doing a more on-site, like practice of being able to be there and working with a CM or something like that is just beyond, I mean, it's the values just can't be stressed enough.
Yeah. And we have these great, I think what you're talking about is these great digital tools now for kind of connecting the remote office to what's happening in the field. It's great if you can have an actual agent of the office in the field on a very regular basis, if not every day. But the communication between builders and the office with, the video. I remember early on in New York, it was right when people were getting, the iPhones and people were adopting, the things we all take for granted now. It wasn't really that long ago.
Right.
But the first time I had a FaceTime sort of conference with a builder from on site, it was amazing, right?
Yeah,
it was just like, wow.
Exactly.
And he was showing me how something was being framed together, and we just talked right through it. And I knew at that moment, though, that if I hadn't had the actual experience of having built something myself through the Rural Studio,
key component,
it would have been a more difficult conversation. But it was a really great intersection of Rural Studio, new technology, and conventional.
All right. So I when I was asking you to come on, one of the things that you were asking about the angle and all that other stuff, I'm like, dude, it's just chill. It's just very conversational. But one thing that I did want to be very specific about asking you is, as a student, you went through the Rural Studio. Then, after graduation, you stayed on and you were instructor at the Rural Studio, which obviously were two completely different experiences.
Yeah.
Then I know you went on to become an instructor later on, as also as a practitioner. How has the experiences not only just evolved, from your experience, but also how has it kind of like shaped both the way that you teach as
Mhm.
well as the way that you practice?
Well, I think in the broadest sense, the experience of the Rural Studio just it, it underpinned kind of the human undertaking of what we do in terms of it involves a lot of people, and those relationships are really the key to success in at any level. So, um, and I would say the other thing that has been sort of constant is how do I say this? Like being generous in your approach to what you're doing, um, and those things have nothing to do with the practice, the technical practice of architecture, but it was just the context of how things were approached. That it was this, you're doing things collaboratively, and again, that's not just in a technical sense. That means you have to be open and work with other human beings in a positive and kind of open-minded way, and you have to learn to communicate in a lot of different ways. And I've found that lesson to be very valuable at every stage of my career. And that's the thing. And your career evolves, and you're practicing under different circumstances, very different than the actual reality of what I did at the Rural Studio. But
Right.
teaching, I did a little bit of teaching in New York, and I have to say that what was difficult about I wanted New York to be like teaching at the Royal Studio, and it wasn't, just for many reasons. But what I did try and bring to that teaching situation was to teach the sense of resourcefulness and kind of the self self-starting, taking responsibility for what you're doing, in a very personal way. I think one of the other things that you could critique about the profession of architecture, like you just said, is that it necessarily you have a lot of people who need to do a lot of different things, particularly on bigger projects. And so it is easy for people to compartmentalize and for people to kind of look at tasks and just kind of do the task and check it off the list and pass it on to the next person. But the Rural Studio really taught you, I think, in the words of David Biggie, to be responsible for the whole thing.
Right.
And even in this one little task you were doing, you needed to have that consciousness that it's, you're not literally, well, until you get to the upper levels of practice and you are steering an entire team of people in a larger office doing a bigger project. I think then you do really have responsibility for the whole thing. And you have to see how each little piece fits in. But I think engendering that feeling to every person at every level of the team is an important thing.
And
Does that make sense?
Yeah, oh, yeah, absolutely. Because that was that was one of the things that because one of my jobs to steer this team is to take a variety of different experience levels and match them up with each other, so that especially now, because the biggest worry that I have, especially working remote, is how are we able to enrich and continue to mentor all of these younger, less experienced emerging architects in a way that we would normally be sitting next to them and talking through them. I mean, I have this, I don't know if it's a good habit or bad habit or whatever, but a habit of sitting down and grabbing whatever piece of paper that might be next to me, whether it's a little Post-it note or whatever, and sketching through all of these different ideas with them so that they kind of understand. They'll come up and ask me, hey, and it probably turns into a far longer conversation than they were hoping for. But what I hope is that when they leave my desk and they're kind of on their path of like doing that, threshold detail for an elevator, that they kind of understand that, kind of like that, yes, this is just a small detail within, this broader context, but it all is part of the broader context, and you need to understand how all of this stuff works together. I mean, now you have this, you have your metal frame around an elevator, but that metal frame and the head height and all that other stuff is, talking to other things, and all of the little things that I'm asking you to do have a bigger role. And so you may feel like your role is just this small little thing, but it really is part of the broader context, and having them understand the broader context. It's going back to,
Right.
and I always talk about in Summer Option, day one, when we were pulled in and they showed us the Eames video, Powers of 10.
Mm-hmm.
And although I've been back a couple of times, and I was talking to a studio with David Henson, just this current studio of his, and I was just like, well, have you guys seen Powers of 10? And they're like looking at me like I've got three heads, and I'm like, oh, hell no. Like, no. And I start sending them all links to it. It's just like, I was like, we were sitting there when we were forced to watch Powers of 10, thinking to ourselves that, why the hell are we watching this? This old video doesn't make much sense to us.
Right.
Until, we started to really truly understand this whole macrovision, microvision, and zooming in and looking at something, then zooming out and seeing how
Right.
that little something affects the big something. And on many cases, that zooming in and zooming out are it helps make you understand that every part has a role in the greater whole. And so trying to like let them understand and know that they may feel like they're, just doing a toilet room plan, or they're just doing this or just doing that. And maybe it's just because of like the level of experience they have at the time, but trying to truly involve them with the ownership of like the greater whole is something that I kind of strive for. And that's one of the things that, I've pulled from my experience at Auburn, and all of my interactions with Sam. I've resorted to calling him Sam instead of Samuel for some reason. But I mean, just, my interaction with him was like the compassion of, it's not just about, the one individual thing. It's how does all of this fit together?
Yeah.
One thing I think would be really cool to kind of hear from your guys' perspective is like because this isn't really talked about in the movie or really shown beyond. I mean, there's some sketches shown that are wonderful throughout the film that are more for like little title sections or quotes. But what was the design process like for these projects that got built? And from a student's point of view, but also from the instructor's point of view, because it sounds to me like what's presented in the movie is like there's one project per year. Maybe there's more than that. Maybe there is less. I don't know. But maybe you guys could just talk about that, because what we really see in the movie is the building process and the community aspect of it. But what's it like to go through that design process? How did it even happen?
Oh, messy.
Yeah.
But, just before we head off on that tangent, I have to say the most frustrating thing to me right now with this remote thing is it is so hard to explain things to people without the ability to draw on a piece of paper, sitting side by side. I mean, yes, you can sort of do a certain amount of stuff online, but it just the quickness, the spontaneity, and like I said, just for me, the visceral, just it's so much quicker and easier to get it when you have a piece of paper, a trace over something.
Well, that's how you communicate, and that's how you've been trained to communicate, and now you can't have it. It's a lot harder. Let's just say
it's a lot harder. I find it.
So let me ask this. So we use Zoom as our tool, and one of the reasons why we made that decision was, and we were just talking about this on a kind of a manager's meeting on Friday with everybody, because people worry about different security aspects of different tools that we're using, and the vulnerability that the firm has with using this stuff. And I kind of applauded them for choosing Zoom over, like, say, Microsoft Teams, because I've engaged with so many different people and in what they use. worked with Microsoft Teams. Some people are still using Skype and all of these other things. And so one of the things, that I was applauding them is the ability to be able to have the markup tools, so that there are, the annotation tool is great because we do actually are able to like draw over the top of it and have these conversations. I was, we kind of paired up with, and I kind of mentioned this, that, David invited Air St. Gross to kind of work with them in his current design studio at Auburn, because they're doing more of kind of this campus planning thing. And, we're known for kind of our expertise in campus planning. And so he had reached out to us, and I just heard the words Auburn and raised my hand and said, absolutely. I was like, you cannot, it was like, I don't care if nothing comes out of this, but just, like a little bit, I want to be involved with whatever we're going to do at Auburn. Because when I first started working there, they had started, we were awarded the School of Nursing building at Auburn, and I didn't get a chance to work on it because they hired me for my kind of like ability to be able to do a lot of like larger renovation type projects and stuff. And so they had a specific project for me in mind. And so I sat next to the PM that was working on Auburn and kind of just, pining over, God, I wish I could be doing that. And they're like, oh, we're going to Auburn. I'm like, give me something, anything, a pencil, whatever. And so, we were doing that. And the great thing about it is that, so now that everybody's working remotely, and we went down there for a little while, and they came up here for a little while. And then once that was all shut down, we kind of like paired up with a handful of students. And the great thing is they go through their process, and we've got our cameras on and we're looking at each other in the face, and they pull up their, the projects, that the process that they're working on. And from the professionals aspect, we were talking to them about how we would approach it, and maybe kind of give them, a desk crit of things, and being able to kind of like draw over the top of them. We were, both he and I were like, flooding back and forth ideas and all of this other stuff. And then to kind of like watch the iterations as he was doing it, it's a little bit more of like doing a real quick sketch out, when you're talking to a client, and then you say, well, let me go back and kind of work that out a little bit, and then I'll come back to you. It's a little more like that than the more spontaneity that you get from just sitting there with a sketch pad or something. But, it still helps the evolution of that. And so being able to do that, I really appreciate that. So I'm just curious, like, what are you guys doing that kind of helps foster, that remote working within just your coworkers?
You want me to answer, or Well, I had a really interesting experience that I didn't realize this with Zoom, but apparently you can take control of the other person's screen. And so I was working with a colleague, a young person in our office, and we work on ArchiCAD, and we use the 3D visualization, as part of design and development process. We, don't just look at things in 2D. And I was just like, ooh, there's this little button that says, control, swap control or whatever. I was actually able to use the ArchiCAD on her computer through my computer and just, manipulate the model, move it around, and make it the way that it needed to be as a way. And that was the closest to just sketching out a detail 2D and saying, no, not like this, like this. But the ability to do that at a distance, three-dimensionally in the model, was pretty powerful. So I think we're going to be doing a lot more of that.
Yeah, I've taken control of, and not let them know that I was doing that. I've taken control of a couple of people's Bluebeam, and they're like, "Wait, who's drawing it? What's going on?"
Stop.
We've been using
stop them from panning.
We've been using the whiteboard app on Microsoft Teams, and that allows multiple people to be kind of in a whiteboard space all at the same time. It's not anything really like being at the same whiteboard at the same time physically, but it's something. And so what we do have it so that it works on, iPad that has the pencil support and stuff, and that it works really well. And then a couple people have the Microsoft Surface Studio computers, where it's like the big screen that you can draw on, like a drawing board. So it helps a lot. And it's nice because you can throw images in there and move them around. And that's probably the closest thing that I've seen to actually being able to collaborate in kind of a more analog-like digital environment where people can be anywhere and participating in that and still talking to each other over audio or sharing their video, but seeing what other people are drawing. It really comes down to the hardware, like, because nobody wants to draw with a mouse. Nobody can draw with a mouse very well. It's just like drawing with a brick, right? So you gotta have some kind of a stylus or pencil input or whatever.
That's a really good point. That's what we need to get. Everybody needs to get a iPad Pro.
This is not sponsored by Apple.
Yeah. No.
I will say, probably annoyingly, that I tend to draw a lot with the mouse. That the team's just like, they just like, all I say is, don't move this screen. Yeah. And then and then they're like, oh shit, here comes Cormac. He's gonna start sketching all over the place. And sure enough, I start sketching all over the place.
Yeah.
And then the great thing is that when you're doing that, you can just do like a screen cap of it. And, within the actual thing, it hits save, and then you can just like capture all of those moments, and then it pops up when you're done, and you can like grab a hold of that and either move it to a folder on site, or you can kind of like move it into like the Zoom chat. I don't know how many times you guys, or how many different Zoom conversations that you guys have going on, but it feels like I have thousands, and it's able to just like move some of the stuff back and forth between the conversations, just so we can have, it's just like, this guy's working on this guy's working on this one's, these people are over here doing this stuff, and then I've got like, broad team, then a small team, then, it's just like, it is definitely putting my management skills to the test, and being able to make sure that not only is everybody working, but that they understand what they're supposed to be working on. And just really truly understanding, okay, I've given you a task, but do you really understand what that task is? And not in a condescending way, but just a way of just like, say, look, I mean, normally you and I would be sitting down and walking through all these things. I'd pull all of these different examples together. Am I still able to do that in a remote fashion? And, for the most part, we've been doing pretty well, and people don't seem to be being left behind, which I, find pretty thankful. But I also tell them, I'm like, look, if you feel overwhelmed, stop, take a deep breath, and just talk to me.
Yeah. So here's a question for you guys. Do you think that the remote, working situation requires for each team member to, in a way, be more independent than they would be in a, because what I'm finding is, like, for the people that I, on my team, like you said, they're within kind of eye shot and earshot of me, would be normally on a daily basis. And I know that I'm going to catch more.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
But here, when I'm checking in with someone maybe once or twice a day, it's like, I really have to make sure that when we're apart, they can carry on. So I think that might be a good thing, actually.
I definitely agree that, you are definitely requiring them to be a lot more independent, a lot more responsible for what they're doing, because they ultimately are hoping that they understand that, they're responsible for X, Y, and Z. And because that's all they're doing, they really have got to be like the self-starter. And so, I definitely think that, this is helping people grow quicker. I mean, the one thing, and call this the
helping or forcing.
Well, helping and forcing them to grow quicker.
Yeah, some people might not want to grow so fast.
Yeah.
Because one of the things, if you think about this, okay, so when I graduated and I started working for a firm, I was a little bit older, so they expected me to, be more mature. And so they gave me tasks as a project manager on smaller projects almost right out of the box, when I didn't even know what the hell I was doing. And a lot of times it would be almost like my old boss treated me like my father would be, is, hey, Dad, can you, tell me this? He's like, well, look it up first.
Yeah.
Right.
Figure it out for yourself first. Right. And if you, go through the effort of trying to figure it out, And if you get it wrong, I'm going to be here to help you, because ultimately it doesn't serve any purpose to me if we send something out wrong. And so I'll be here to like make sure that it's sent out correctly. And I will talk you through, what is right or wrong about what you just did and kind of help you evolve. And so, I would sit down with suite catalogs and all of these other things, looking at manufacturer's details and all of these other things to try to figure out how to teach myself how to do all of this stuff. That it's not that he was unwilling to do it. It's he didn't have time to sit down and hold my hand.
Right.
He had his own things that he needed to do while expecting me to do the things that he wanted me to do. And so I did them. And then I would come back down and, check in with him, on a daily basis or whatever, and say, okay, here's some of the, print them out, and here's some of the things that I would do differently. And so they would look, and he would say, okay, we need to do this or we need to do that. And so that helped me learn how to basically be kind of like a self-explorer, figure out where to go. And I think that now that's actually, if I say, I need you to work on these window details, I'm going to give them examples. I'm going to, show them, who we're using as a manufacturer. And they've been doing basically the same thing, using the digital tools that they have around them, which are global, to be able to, work through some of these things. I will say this. There is one thing that I find the most amazing outcome of all of this, because since we moved from hand drafting to the computer, we were supposed to be saving paper. And I would contend that when we turned digital in like CAD and all that other stuff prior to this little thing, we probably used more paper than we did when we were drawing by hand, because we had to be so very deliberate on what we drew that we only used X amount of paper. And then this one, we're like, oh shit, we can just, print out whatever the hell we wanted to. Yeah. It's free, And so I could guarantee you, I have not hit print other than to a PDF on anything in the 6 weeks that I've been isolated.
That's interesting. Interesting.
Huge drop in paper.
Yeah. So I mean, if it finally gets us to the point where we're responsible stewards of, managing our resources, awesome.
Right. Unintended consequences. That's a good one.
Exactly.
Well, what you're saying reminds me of something that Sam used to always say, which is, go in there and, he would really give people responsibility and trust that they would, who were completely not qualified. I mean, students who had never built anything, they didn't really know that much about architecture. And he'd just say, do it, figure it out, and don't be afraid to get get the cart in the ditch. We'll help you get it out. Like, that's what we're here for. He had this philosophy of, that was really his responsibility as a teacher, was to give students the chance to figure it out for themselves and give them the safety and sense of security that, like, no mistake you're going to make is going to be so bad that you should be afraid. Like, proceed and be bold. That was that philosophy. And I think that that's a really good thing to teach anyone at any level in any circumstance.
And I kind of, so I don't even know if you know this, but so, like, I was supposed to go out there that first semester for the Shepherd Bryant house. And when my parents got into a car accident, I had to stay back. But like I was telling Evan, is like the thing that Sam did is he knew I was supposed to be out there. He knew that I, missed that opportunity to really be a part of the rural studio, the way that, everybody else had, the opportunity to be part of the rural studio because, personal circumstances. Right. But, he was always there for me. Anytime he was back at the main campus, come and visit me and stuff like that. And we would always talk. And the interesting thing that I learned from being a part of, or having him a part of my life, was the compassion that he had for other people, which was kind of the whole point of the studio. Was I couldn't be a part of the studio the way that I was going to be a part of the studio, the way that you were a part of the studio. But I was always a part of the studio because Sam made me feel like I was just a part of like this greater whole of this greater community. And that's the thing that I continue to appreciate about what the Rural Studios mission really is. And though the mission has sort of evolved and grown up, I mean, it was in its infancies, when Sam was still alive, and the way that it's grown and developed, and where you and other people have had helped evolve it beyond kind of like post Sam, was it needed to evolve, but the mission was always there. The compassion for your client, the compassion for the camaraderie of your fellow student, and your future profession and all that other stuff were always a part of the mission that has never been lost in all of it. I mean, people sometimes criticize students for going out there because as a resume patter and all this other stuff, and they may go out there thinking that, ooh, this is going to look great on my resume. They don't leave that way.
No, they have to earn it. That's the thing about it. You can't fake it out there.
No, you can't.
I'm glad you say that word, compassion. I think that's a really relevant word, and I agree that's a real reflection of Sambo as a person. And part of what made his involvement unique, and actually him as a teacher. Maybe not that unique. I think teachers in general are compassionate people, but definitely was a major part of his character.
I mean, there was another thing that, whether it's good or bad for my career, has always been the genuine nature of him. Was just something that, it's just, you're going to get me. And that's always been my philosophy of my life, is you will get who I am. You may not necessarily like it all the times. You may think apologies. That it's fantastic. It's definitely no apologies, but but I will always be there for you. You will always get the compassion from me. Sometimes it's going to be, tough love.
Right.
but it is going to be, I have the thing that I learned just, from Auburn in general, but from Sambo, being DK's TA for multiple times, which Evan, you'll see DK Ruth in the movie, on several occasions. He was kind of like the at campus wing of the Rural Studio.
You cannot forget about DK. I mean, he doesn't get talked about so much now after all these years, but man, also an incredible individual.
Yes. Yeah. And so I learned so much from being around these guys in the way that they're just true. I mean, there were two very genuine people who didn't have to sugarcoat who they were, because they actually, the term that I always say is I just want you to give a shit about what you do. And they it really, in a way, maybe I learned it earlier, maybe, being in the military and all that other stuff kind of helped in some of that. But, being around people like that, who you could just see as an example that they actually gave a shit about what they do, that, they do. So it brought a level of passion to them, whether it was abrasive or brash or whatever, or as Jay or Jack or however he considers calling himself, says about being in piss and vinegar and stuff like that in movies.
Right.
It's about just being genuine to the thing. And the one thing that I try to make sure that anybody who's kind of a mentee, if you want to call it that, of mine throughout my years in the practice is, you've got to be as true to yourself as you are. And if you are, anything that you do, sometimes, doing construction documentation, that sort of sucks sometimes. But, understand, if you believe that it is just part of the process of this greater good, this final outcome where, the story that I love to tell about this elementary school that, it was 6 years of my life of doing this one very involved renovation, historic renovation / addition to a elementary school, that it beat us down a lot. It was hard a lot. But then at the end of the day, when I got to walk through and show the media center people, they were in this windowless room that was that they had to like package most of the books up because they didn't have enough space for it. And then when I finally gave them this beautiful 360-degree view of downtown Annapolis, Maryland, where you could see the State House and all these colonial buildings and everything else, and the water and all this other stuff, they like started crying, and they were just like, I don't deserve this. And I'm like, no, you deserve more than this. And it was just like, this is the kind of the whole point of us doing this stuff, is that we're able to give them what we believe they deserve, which they may think that they just need a room with 4 walls and, a desk to be in. Well, what makes it better than to, kind of give you whatever? But so that's always, something that's been something that I've carried from all of my experiences of the professors that were part of all of these different Sam and DK and and Andrew. Before Andrew went out there on site, Andrew was out in at the main campus, and the good thing was being older. Both when I first started there, when I was with you, and then left, and then went back, and then Andrew was there, and I was even older and had 4 years of experience in an architecture firm, and going back and wrapping up 3rd year, and then going through all of these things. Could make connections with the professors because I was roughly their age, and so it was great to be able to like engage with these guys and just feed off of the passion that they had for the profession, which just kind of continued to keep validating my choice of being continuing, because I could have easily like left when I left you guys and kind of just dropped out and dropped off the face of the map, and I could have easily just said, I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. But, it's through the passion of meeting these people.
Oh, yeah.
It helps validate my choice.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's interesting to think about, when talking about architecture as a social responsibility and the passion and giving a damn and all these things. And then going into, I've given several presentations in, elementary schools, high schools. What's the first question? It's always, how much money do you make, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And I mean, maybe there's just a filter right there, right? Because that shouldn't be what it's about. But I think a lot of people do go into the profession because they see it as a profession where they can make money. And there's no doubt you can definitely make a good living being an architect. But thinking about this from like the rural studio perspective about serving the community, the kind of work that we do, which is public work, which is very community-based. It's hospitals, it's schools, it's things like that.
Right.
And having that passion, I think that really is, and now talking about people working independently and really they have to be self-motivated to a certain extent and driven to solve problems on their own first, or try to, and then, come up with different options and then present those back and talk to somebody with more experience about why or why not those things may or may not work. It seems to me like that there's a common thread here about, self-motivation, drive, passion, and service. And I think like that to me are the core values of being an architect. And even in a larger firm where it is much easier to hide from that, right? You're just a piece of a puzzle that could be very small. From my perspective, like I get to work on the business. I'm not working in the business. I'm not designing projects anymore, but I'm working on hopefully making the process better and making it more inclusive of all of these people and giving them a pathway so that they can become a great architect and have a great long career being an architect. But really trying to connect them back to, I think, through programs like this, where it is about people and it is about place. And it's about people and place right where you're at. I think that's really interesting because as firms grow and they try to become international firms or national firms or whatever, and you start to lose sight of your community and you're just trying to do work for the sake of feeding the machine or just doing more work or getting media attention or whatever those things are, there's several disconnects that have built within our profession and our community. And it to me, it's really grounding to watch a film like this. And, I told Cormac the first time I saw it, it was, what the hell am I doing with my life? I really felt that very strongly, and I've done quite a few different things to get to where I'm at experience wise with design build, and I've got a wood shop, and I know I love making things, and so to me now my outlet is working on our business so that it can be a better business, so that we can evolve our practice. But I really feel like this movie does ground me back into why I'm an architect and why I went into this in the first place. I think that to me awesome. is the most powerful thing about this.
Yeah, it's really great to hear you say all those things, and I'm a big proponent of that. The real point of the studio is all those other things. It's not. I mean, yes, it's making is rewarding. I think it turns people onto that, and people realize that there's a benefit to that just in and of itself. But I think these bigger issues that you're talking about, the motivation, why are you doing this? Why do you give a damn? What you just said about, in a place right here, that kind of thinking is really what the studio was meant to be about. At least that's what I strongly feel under Sambo's, origination of it. That was what the architecture part, it wasn't incidental, but in a way it was the means to the other things. Teaching design, he enjoyed that, and the building, I think he enjoyed seeing the students engage in it, but there were bigger things that he was concerned with in acting for the education of the students, and also challenging the profession to be exactly what you said, the thing that comes along later. You're exposed to it, and you go, what am I doing with my life? I think that was exactly the question he wanted to pose by starting the studio and doing it the way that he set it up to be. Yeah.
So one of the things that I found interesting was early on in the movie, you had Peanut, who was talking about, what are all these guys here? They want to become architects, and
so dismissive. It was
not,
awesome.
But they're not. They don't build for me. They build for rich people. And that's constantly the perception that we're always fighting within architecture. Coming from a blue collar auto worker family, I mean, architects really weren't for me. And how the hell did I even become, have this desire to actually want to become an architect? Because, they aren't working for people like me, type idea. And then as the studio became more involved with the community and becoming more involved with the people about the community, you see when you revisit him later on, and clearly years have passed, because, you could just see the age on Jack's face, that it just, and then he starts to talk about, how the effects of the rural studio have had on the community and things like that. That's the thing that I appreciate and have always kind of like taken from people. The education like this, the education like we have at Auburn, is that, in fact, I've even told this to several people just in this past studio that I've been dealing with the David Hinson studio, is there are people who have an impression of Auburn being this architecture school in the sticks of Alabama, and you're just like hick architects kind of thing. And it's just this, somewhat dismissive about, like I've been several times been, treated very dismissively because of my education at a, state school and all this other crap. But the point is that, through like my work and through like, just my actions, I've changed people's minds on what, like Auburn architecture is all about. But, in a way that's kind of like, to me, that sort of seems like the point of architecture in some cases, is changed people's minds who normally wouldn't have the interface with architects about what architects can do for them. And we will have a much greater reach. I don't know if you remember this back in the day, Steve, but when we had a lecture in B6, and it was by why am I blanking on his name? He's the current CEO of AIA. What?
Ivy?
Thank you, Robert Ivy. But this was back when he was like the editor of Architecture, and he was talking about like the amount of, he had given a percentage of like, and it was a really incredibly low percentage, and it's kind of stuck with me, of buildings that are designed by architects, because
Right.
people
Right.
don't have a real use for architects on the low budget side of things. But
Right.
I think that to me has always been like, that's where architects are needed the most,
Oh,
is on the
absolutely.
low budget side of things.
Yeah,
Right.
this
If
is
only we
something
could
that
figure out a way to work
Exactly.
on those
Exactly.
projects.
it's
Yeah.
interesting because this is something that really hits home for me. I've been doing research on the exact subject that you're bringing up right now, which is, and other people have been doing research too, which lucky for me, I get to just cite it. But it there's companies out there like Dark Matter Labs that are doing research into the effect that architects or people in AEC have on, the local, the national, the global building supply, if you just want to call it that. And it's crazy how small those numbers are. It's minuscule. It's 1% of the whole built environment. And so when you think about who pays for those buildings, it is also the 1%, but it's on the other end of the scale, right? It's the people who have most of the wealth in the world. And so we're doing 1% of the work for 1%, for the 1%. And we continue to actually whittle that down and compete against each other because we are we're bred to be competitive, right?
Right.
And the industry as a whole is very competitive. It's all about doing more for less. And so you're leaving 99% off the table. And what this movie hits home to me about is that it is actually, you can actually make a difference for that other 99% in meaningful ways, where it isn't just a thing that you walk through on a daily basis. It's a thing that it really is where you spend all your time, and it can enhance your life. And to me, architects have the power to affect the other 99%, yet we continue to, and the we is, obviously a generalization, but it's continuing to whittle down the 1% for the 1% and do more for less. That seems to me like a completely broken business model. And when you're talking about, how can we survive, we actually just have to reinvent it. I think that what you're talking about it is totally doable. You could build architecture, you could make architecture. Like the global building supply is projected to have to double by 2060 to just keep up with population growth of 10 billion by 2050. And like to put that into like real world terms, they say that you have to build a city the size of New York every 5 weeks for the next 33 years for that global building stock to double by 2060. That's insane, right?
That's insane.
That is insane. And it has to be carbon neutral. And it has to be carbon neutral. How do you do that? Right.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
And so it's like there is so much for architects to do out there. And we have to think more broadly about it. And maybe those designs don't have to be as grand, but they can still make everybody's life better. They just have to be repeatable on a much larger level so that more people get to live in architecture, which will make their lives better, which will make society better. Like it is this very complicated and kind of interwoven problem, but there's so many ways that we can affect that and make it better. And to me, like maybe you don't get these giant $450 million commissions, but maybe you get a lot more of these normal, quote unquote, normal commissions, and you can, marry design and prefabrication and all these things to produce architecture for more people, because not only do we need it, but it's going to make everything better. It's going to make people more productive for society, which will bring up the level of society as a whole. And what's crazy is architects have the power to do this. We just have to look at it differently and get out of the way that we've always done it.
Yeah, I think one of the big true critiques of the rural studio model is the challenge to find a way to work in communities and scenarios and with, frankly, types of clients that the architecture profession has not developed a protocol, if you will,
What's
for
so interesting
how to
is
work with those constituencies. And
architects
it
have
might be
always
very different. It might be very low tech, and it
yeah,
might be, in fact, actually simple and light. And I think you used the
right,
word agile earlier.
right.
It's like, why do maybe the best thing is just an architect can sit down with some people for a few hours and bring the knowledge and skills and imagination to bear. But maybe we don't need all the other stuff. I mean, that's just kind of a simplification. But I think in a way, the Rural Studio did pose that question of like, to be an architect, do you have to have all this that goes along with
Hmm.
what the profession says that you have to have? And do you have to deliver your projects in this very specific, frankly, it's a heavy-handed, lots of overhead, you know what I mean? There's a
Yeah.
lot, could be a lot simpler. You might be able to
Right.
affect things more directly.
I think
mean, there,
it's interesting in the movie, like the story arc of Peanut, Cormac, that you were talking about, right? In the beginning, it's like, what have they done for me? And at the end, it's I can find no fault with the Rural Studio.
Right.
And how did that happen? By showing the value of an architect and what it can have on a community. But you had to do it. You had to prove it. And that's what Rural Studio did over all those years was they proved it. And I think a lot of the struggle of being an architect is showing value or proving value. Why do you deserve to exist? And yet in a context like that, which like you said, it was difficult, it still happened. It wasn't maybe ideal conditions, or maybe it was for this to happen, but it was a place where value was shown and completely changed the perspective of what architects can bring to a community. I think
Right.
that's
Well,
very
I'd
interesting.
like to give an anecdote because there was a time where there was the first Rural Studio movie that was made while I was teaching there, and I did a bunch of presentations with the filmmaker right right as I left the Rural Studios. Right around 2002, 2003, we were going to universities and going to AIAs, presenting the film, doing a Q&A, and one of the perennial questions you always get, usually from an architect in the office, would be like, so what about the building code? And they always sort of couch or qualify the work of the studio by kind of inferring that you're able to be so imaginative and you're able to do these crazy things like build out of straw bale or carpet, because you don't have to follow these rules. And I would always say, well, yeah, we didn't have a code official, but we took life safety seriously. And at the same time, we didn't have any money, um, we didn't have any skills, so we found ways to be resourceful within the context of how we were working, where we were working, and still set the bar for quality as high as any other piece of architecture. It's like, I'll trade you, give me $1 million to build my project. Give me, the technical, a welder who's technically qualified to weld something. Give me a community full of qualified and educated and expert builders to build my project. These are the things that architects work with every day and still end up building shitty buildings. So it's like, don't qualify it as saying, well, you're getting away with something. It's like, no, it's like within the context that you're in, set the bar for great architecture and be resourceful enough to find how to achieve it. Don't, the one does not discount the other. It always made me very mad to hear these smug
Yeah.
sort of urban architects go back and say, well, blah,
you
blah,
know that
blah.
I mean that kind of like guerrilla architecture mentality that the Rural Studio had has always been kind of like beaten down by in a lot of small firm architects and stuff that are just community based that are just working with what they have are very much like that.
Yeah.
And you always have like the greater whole of the architectural community bashing them down as, oh, this isn't real architecture, this is not what architects do, kind of thing. And it's so very dismissive. I mean, one of our biggest problems in architecture in general is we tend to eat our own.
Yeah.
you know um and rather than kind of like enriching each other in the community and stuff, and really that is literally the biggest takeaway that I've had from my experience with those who created the rural studio and keep the kind of like that mission alive is, what is the best way that I personally, with my experience, can enrich the profession? And I think that's sort of what we've been talking about. And, it was kind of like our biggest takeaway as we've moved throughout our careers is, what are the things that we can do with our, like what we've learned from either back as students or throughout the profession to, make it better and enrich it, and rather than trying to just like knock each other down to,
Right.
and of course we're not going to like do more than 9% of the building, designed with it that's constructed within the U.S. I think that was one of those ridiculously low numbers that Robert Ivy was bringing up at the time. Was like, just it was like so ridiculously low. It's because why would a builder who wants to just do a straight cut and dry building, and you're out there telling him, I want X amount of dollars for this, for my design fees and this, that, and the other, and it's just like, I want to do really good work in my community to make it, my community's built environment, the most aesthetically pleasing and nice and cohesive and enriched for the entire community. And, I may not go and ask for like 8 to 12% of the overall construction fees, and maybe I just, will, do 2% or whatever. But I've got a bunch of these little projects that's going to keep me afloat and keep my office afloat and all that other stuff, but I'm just going to leave a better mark on it.
I think that's a great place to wrap it up.
Yeah.
I wanted to just say thanks to you, Steve, for coming on and just chatting with us, and not making this like a complete rehash of the film. I think it's always more interesting to have a conversation around a topic than necessarily something that was outlined up front. So thanks for playing along. It was really fun.
Hey, my pleasure, and great to talk to both of you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Where can people, I want to give you the opportunity to show what you've been or what you're doing now. Do you have a website or anywhere that you would like people to maybe go find out more about you?
Not really. No, I'm.
You're like, I'm trying to stay under the radar.
Yeah, no, I'm actually in witness protection program. No.
Okay.
The firm that I work for right now in Portland, Maine, is called Steven Blatt Architects, and we're a small 6-man firm. This firm has been in existence. My boss has been practicing in Maine and New England for over 30 years.
Wow.
And has done 60-some school projects. That's our bread and butter. So mainly elementary, and through high school, not academia. And yeah, so you can check them out online, Steven Blatt Architects.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure to have this conversation and to talk to you guys both about kind of your experiences with Sambo and the rural studio. I think that's just something that I feel like a particular calling toward that type of education and that type of work. And I really kind of just find the most meaning in it. And so for me, this has been an absolute pleasure of a conversation to have.
Likewise.
Cool. Well, until next time.
Take care.
All right, here we are. We're done.
Frank and you. My funeral was beautiful. Oh, we got it for days on end. Thank God I'm cut, 'cause of my kind of luck, I'll be up on the block in front of all of my friends. This is what you get. This is what you get. This is a schedule. This is a set. It's unpredictable unless you forget. If you blow, you can bet. I know. This is what you get. This is a schedule. This is a set. It's unpredictable as you forget. If you blow, you can can bet. I know. The floor makes footprints from the bottom to the table, to the top, to the basement. Blow by blow, kinds of steel, very real, very block, but it's still very block body. Paper, scissors, system, preach, deep, open the reach, fast and amps. Back jump, stump pages, atlas through the rages, a new tool and a toy fool. Oh, and this is what you get. This is what you get. This is a schedule, this is a set. It's so predictable that you forget. If you blow, you can bet. I know. This is what you get. This is a schedule, this is a set. It's so predictable that you forget. If you blow, you can bet. I know. Hey dude, please don't shoot, 'cause I got a son that I never knew. And I got to with the mama, well, she don't know what to do. No, she don't know what to do. What'd you come back to do? What'd you come back to do? What'd you come back to do? This is what you get. This is a schedule, this is a set. It's so predictable that you forget. If you blow, you can bet. I know. This is what you get. This is a schedule, this is a set. It's so predictable that you forget. If you blow, you can bet. I know. This is what you get.
Yeah, so this is totally what the show's about. Is just it's a conversation about, our life in architecture and just, the day-to-days and everything, high philosophies, low philosophies, no philosophies, just, whatever. It's a conversation. And, the good thing is it's kind of been 7 years strong now, Evan.
Mm-hmm.
We talk about the passion.
Yeah, very cool, very impressive too.
Yeah.
To see that you guys get out globally like you do is really, really something.
Yeah, I sent him that little snapshot of the the podcaster thing, Evan. That every so often we're just
like you.
When I started getting those things, I was just like, why the hell are people in Russia listening to us? It's just like, what?
They're all staying at home. That's why.
But it's what is ultimately funny about that. And I remember us getting people reaching out to us, like midway through the our years of doing this. Remember this one, Evan? We got a comment from an architect in Albania.
Yeah.
Albania, who was just basically saying that they lived through the same things that we lived through.
Yeah.
And so the language that we're talking is kind of this very universal architectural language or architect language, not architectural language. We're not where we literally are like
architecture.
Yeah. We're like, the culture of, and the things that people go through and on a very global level are so very local in issues. And it's so very cool to be able to do crap like that. And
All right, cool.
And,
I'm going to be listening to you now. That's on my radar.
Cool.
Yeah, so it's kind of fun. I was telling I've used this story, I don't know, countless times of, like harkening back to us in the studio, and I was just like, my some of my vivid memories of, you are, I'll keep the other vivid memories out
You'll
of it.
keep them clean.
Yeah, but I always talk about, I was just like, the thing that I find interesting about how life in architectural studios throughout the country are very similar. But there's this kind of like interesting like regionalism that you have in all of these different things. Like you can go to a Northwest architectural studio, and it's completely different from like what we experience in Auburn. It's like I remember getting off the elevator and just getting hit with this smell of a shit ton of crock pots going, making gumbo and jambalaya and all this other shit, because we were going to be in the studio forever.
Right.
And so, we were like, gotta eat. And we were like, me pulling in a big sleeper sofa and, Josh like building that kind of like weird bunk bed type thing that he had above his, and it was just like, and then the constant practical jokes that went on. And I can't remember his last name, but remember the Tony blonde-haired guy?
Yeah.
He was from Philly. What was his last name?
Oh God, it was Italian. It was
because he was, and so he was from Philly, and he was always people, and so we of course would constantly back with him. And remember when he came into the studio and was messing with people, and then passed out drunk, and I glued his zipper and pants shut. And so, because what's the first thing you do when you wake up after?
Gotta go.
And
Oh my God,
I can't go.
it was the same guy that
Tony. What was his name?
I can't remember it.
I can see his face clear as day.
I remember I had to like clean out his leg because he played rugby and he was 8-man, and he, for some reason, fashioned a coat hanger branding and branded his leg with the number 8.
Yeah, that's exactly. This tells you a little bit about Tony.
Yeah,
he was intense.
Oh man,
he was intense.
That's awesome.
Some crazy people.
We had some crazy people.
And he would come in and he would like steal. So is it Danny McCatherine? Is that McCatherine is his last name? I think it was Danny.
Yeah.
Or something. And that he would always chew like chiclet gum. You remember that?
Yeah.
And Tony would come in and steal it. Like basically come in, grab it off of his desk, and like just chug the whole thing. And there's only one thing in the world that looks a lot like chiclet gums. And that is X-Lax.
Oh my God. See, I don't remember all this, but
Cormac is like an elephant.
You were this was when you were out second year in and so this was my you weren't there to keep me in check.
You were trouble. You were kind of a troublemaker. You were a bad boy the first few years. You were
I honestly needed to like leave and grow up a little bit, and I was not. Yeah, I still had a lot of soldier left in me, and that was probably not a good thing for the architectural community at the time.